Lucifer had it all: power, beauty, authority. But one thought changed everything. I will be like God. That was his mistake. That was his downfall. And that single act ignited a war that still rages today. But here's what most don't know. He's still fighting, and you are the battlefield. Miss this, and you'll walk blind into a war that's been raging for ages. Watch closely, because the final battle is coming, and the sides are being drawn. Imagine a world beyond time, beyond the stars, a realm more glorious than anything our human eyes could ever behold. This was heaven, a place of perfect order, where radiant beings, known as angels, lived in complete unity under the rule of their Creator. At the center of this divine kingdom was God, the Alpha, the Omega, the source of all life. And around him, a vast number of angels, each with a purpose, each with a role, each with a choice. But among them was one unlike any other: Lucifer. Lucifer was magnificent, one of the highest-ranking angels, full of wisdom and beauty. The Bible describes him as covered in precious stones, a being of perfection, dazzling like a morning star. He wasn't just any angel, he was the asterisk cherub that covered, a guardian of divine glory, standing near the very throne of God. And yet, something stirred within him. Something that had never existed before. Something dark. What could cause the most perfect being in heaven to fall? What could turn harmony into war? The answer might shock you. Lucifer had everything: power, beauty, influence. But it wasn't enough. Something inside him whispered, "You deserve more." You see, Lucifer didn't just want to serve God. He wanted to be like God. The thought was intoxicating. At first, it was just a fleeting idea. But the more he entertained it, the more it grew. Like a tiny spark in a dry forest, it spread, burning hotter, stronger, consuming him. And then came the moment of decision. I will ascend to the heavens, Lucifer thought. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly. I will make myself like the Most High. It was the first act of rebellion. No angel had ever dared to question God's authority before. But Lucifer? He didn't just question it, he challenged it. He started whispering to others, sowing seeds of doubt. Why should we serve? Why should we not rule? And just like that, heaven began to divide. The great war was about to begin. Lucifer wasn't alone. He spoke to the angels, weaving a story of injustice, of oppression, of a throne they all deserved to share. Some listened. Some hesitated. Some refused. But then some followed. One by one, thousands, millions of angels turned their loyalty away from God and pledged themselves to Lucifer's cause. And then, the moment came. Heaven trembled. Lucifer stepped forward, no longer a servant, but a challenger. He looked to the throne of God, and with fire in his eyes, declared war. The battle that followed was unlike anything ever seen before. Heaven, once a place of perfect peace, became a battlefield. The forces of light, led by Michael the Archangel, stood against the forces of darkness, led by Lucifer. The clash was violent, unimaginable. Blazing swords, thunderous cries, the heavens shaking under the weight of war. Michael's voice rang out. Who is like God? It was a battle cry, a declaration, a challenge. And then, in one final, decisive blow, Lucifer fell. The mighty morning star, the greatest of angels, was cast down, banished from heaven, never to return. And with him, a third of heaven's angels fell as well. But where did they go? And what would happen next? Lucifer, now called Satan, was not finished. Not yet. Lucifer had lost the war in heaven. But he had not given up. He had a new plan. If he couldn't rule heaven, he would take dominion somewhere else. Somewhere new. Somewhere God had created with love and beauty. Earth. And at the center of it all, the greatest creation of God, humans. This was Lucifer's new battleground. And here, he would strike where it hurt the most. Heaven had cast him out. But on earth, he would make sure history repeated itself. He would do the one thing he did best. He would start a rebellion. And this time, he wouldn't just tempt angels. He would tempt mankind itself. The battlefield had changed. Satan had been cast out of heaven, but he still had power. And now, he set his sights on earth. The world was fresh, untouched, a paradise of beauty and life. And at the center of it all were two humans, Adam and Eve, created in God's image, loved, protected, but also free to choose. And that's exactly what Lucifer needed. He came in disguise, slipping into the Garden of Eden like a shadow in the night. He didn't attack with weapons. He didn't use force. He used words. Did God really say? the first lie ever told, the first seed of doubt ever planted. And just like the angels before them, Adam and Eve had a choice: trust in God or trust in the rebel. The moment Eve hesitated, the battle was already lost. She looked at the fruit, the one thing God had forbidden. It looked good. It felt good. And if Lucifer was right, then maybe, just maybe, it would make her like God. She took a bite. And in that instant, everything changed. The world, once perfect, cracked. Sin had entered. Lucifer had won. And as Adam and Eve stood there, realizing what they had done, they felt something no human had ever felt before. Shame. The war that began in heaven had now reached earth. And humanity was on the losing side. Sin had a price. And that price: separation from God. Adam and Eve, once walking in the presence of their Creator, were now banished from the Garden of Eden. Just like Lucifer had been banished from heaven. Heaven wept. But Lucifer? He laughed. Mankind had fallen, just as he had. And now the world belonged to him. Or so he thought. Because what he didn't know was that God had already put a plan in motion. A plan to take back what had been stolen. A plan to crush the serpent's head. But first, humanity had to face the consequences. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. It didn't take long for darkness to spread. From Adam and Eve came generations of people. And with them came jealousy, violence, greed. The first murder. The first war. The first kingdom built on pride. Lucifer watched with satisfaction. Every act of evil, every corrupt leader, every war fought over power, it was all part of his plan. To turn humans against each other. To turn them against God. To make earth look like hell. But amidst the chaos, a voice still called out. A promise whispered through time. Hope was not lost. God had a plan, and it would shake the foundations of both heaven and hell. Even in the darkness, a light still shone. God was not finished with mankind. From the very moment humanity fell, he had made a promise. A savior would come. A redeemer. Someone who would undo what Lucifer had done. Someone who would stand in the gap, take the punishment, and bring mankind back to God. And that promise? It terrified Lucifer. Because if it came true, then his war, the war he had fought since heaven, would finally come to an end. And he would lose. So he did what he had always done. He fought back. He tried to stop the plan before it could even begin. But what he didn't realize, the war was already won. He just didn't see it yet. Centuries passed. The world groaned under the weight of sin. Kingdoms rose and fell. Empires conquered. Evil thrived. It seemed as though Lucifer had won. But behind the scenes, God was preparing something. A bloodline was chosen. A people set apart. A message whispered through prophets, through visions, through dreams. The Savior is coming. Lucifer heard the prophecy, and fear crept into his heart. He had to stop it. If the promised one was born, it would mean the end of his rule. The end of the war. So he plotted. If he couldn't stop God in heaven, he would stop him on earth. And so, he prepared his greatest attack yet. One night, in a palace far from the common people, a king tossed and turned in his sleep. His name? Herod, the most powerful ruler in Judea. And that night, he had heard a rumor. A child had been born. Not just any child. A king. A Messiah. Lucifer whispered in Herod's ear. This child is a threat. A threat to your throne. A threat to everything. Fear turned to rage. And that rage turned into a command. Kill them all. Every baby boy in Bethlehem. Every last one. A massacre. Lucifer smiled. But what he didn't realize, the child, the promised one, had already been taken to safety. The plan of God could not be stopped. Not by a king. Not by an army. Not even by Lucifer himself. For years, the world remained silent. No great armies. No fire from the sky. Just a man. A carpenter from Nazareth. Jesus. He wasn't what the world expected. No crown. No throne. Just humility. But there was something different about him. He spoke with authority. He healed the sick. He cast out demons with a single word. Lucifer watched, unsettled. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a prophet. This wasn't just a teacher. This was the Son of God. And he was here to take back what had been stolen. The battle was coming. And Lucifer had one last trick up his sleeve. The war in heaven had been fought with swords. But here on earth, it would be fought with words. Lucifer came to Jesus in the wilderness, disguised in whispers, just like he had in the Garden of Eden. If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. A test of hunger. Jesus refused. Throw yourself down from the temple. Angels will catch you. A test of pride. Jesus stood firm. And then Lucifer played his final card. He took Jesus to a high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world, and said, "All of this can be yours. Just bow to me. Power. Glory. The easy way." But Jesus didn't even hesitate. "Get behind me, Satan." And just like that, the tempter was defeated. Lucifer had failed. Again. And the war. It was about to take a turn he never expected. Lucifer was desperate. His time was running out. Jesus was healing the sick, raising the dead, and proclaiming a kingdom greater than any on earth. People followed him. They believed in him. And Lucifer knew, if Jesus succeeded, mankind would be saved. So he did the one thing he had always done. He turned the world against him. He whispered to the religious leaders, "This man is dangerous." He whispered to the crowds, "He's a liar, a fraud." And finally, he whispered to one of Jesus' own disciples, "Betray him." For 30 pieces of silver, the trap was set. The Son of God was walking straight into Lucifer's snare. Or so he thought. Because what happened next? It would be the greatest victory in history, and it would change the war forever. Night had fallen over Jerusalem. A quiet garden, a moment of prayer, and then footsteps. Torches flickered as soldiers approached. Leading them, a man Jesus once called friend, Judas. With a kiss, the betrayal was sealed. The Son of God was arrested, dragged away like a criminal. Lucifer smiled. This was it. The plan had worked. The religious leaders accused him. The people turned against him. And in the end, the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, washed his hands as if he could erase his guilt. The crowd roared, "Crucify him." Lucifer had done it. Or so he thought. Jesus was beaten, mocked. A crown of thorns pressed onto his head. And then, carrying his own cross, he walked up the hill of Golgotha, the place of the skull, nails driven into his hands, his feet. The sky darkened. The earth trembled. Lucifer watched, victorious. The Son of God, hanging between two criminals, bleeding, dying. And then, his final words. "It is finished." He took his last breath. Silence. Lucifer had won. Or so he thought. The body of Jesus was placed in a tomb. A heavy stone rolled in front of it. The world went quiet. Lucifer celebrated. He had done the impossible, killed the Messiah. He had won the war. Hadn't he? But something was wrong. Deep in the spiritual realm, the forces of darkness trembled. Because in the silence of that tomb, something was happening. Something powerful. Something no one, not even Lucifer, could stop. It happened on the third day. A flash of light. A burst of power. And then movement. The stone was rolled away. The tomb was empty. Jesus had risen. Alive. Victorious. The power of sin? Broken. The chains of death? Shattered. Lucifer reeled in horror. The one thing he never expected, the one thing he had no power over, had happened. Jesus had defeated death itself. And now, the war had shifted. Forever. Lucifer had lost. But he wasn't going down without a fight. Jesus had won the victory, but mankind still had a choice. Light or darkness, truth or lies, God or the rebel. And so, Lucifer changed his strategy. He couldn't stop salvation, but he could blind people to it. He would spread false teachings. He would create distractions. He would twist the truth, just like he did in the beginning. And for centuries, he would fight. But the war was already decided. Because one day soon, the king is coming back. And when he does, Lucifer's reign will end. Forever. Jesus had risen. The war had shifted. But before he returned to heaven, he gave his followers a mission. Go into all the world. Preach the good news. Make disciples of all nations. It was a call to battle, not with swords, not with violence, but with truth. Lucifer panicked. He had lost the fight against Jesus, but maybe, just maybe, he could stop his followers. So he whispered doubt into their hearts. You are weak. You are few. You will fail. But they didn't. Against all odds, they spread the message. And the kingdom of God began to grow. But Lucifer wasn't done. He had one more weapon left. Lucifer unleashed his fury. He stirred the Roman Empire against the believers. Christians were arrested, beaten, thrown to lions, burned alive. The message of Jesus should have died with them. But instead, it spread even faster. People saw their faith, their courage, their willingness to die rather than deny the truth. And the world took notice. Lucifer was furious. The more he tried to silence them, the louder they became. He needed a new strategy. If he couldn't destroy the church, he would corrupt it. Lucifer changed his tactics. Instead of attacking the church from the outside, he slithered inside. False teachers rose up. Lies were mixed with truth. People started to twist the message of Jesus, using it for power, for control, for greed. Religions were formed, some claiming to follow Christ, but filled with deception. Wars were fought in God's name. People were led astray. Lucifer smiled. If he couldn't erase the truth, he would distort it. And for centuries, many would fall for his lies. But even then, the light never went out. The true message of Jesus still burned, hidden in the hearts of those who refused to be deceived. And the war continued. The world kept moving forward. Kingdoms rose and fell. Technology advanced. But something else was happening. Something ancient. The prophecies. Words written thousands of years ago were starting to come true. Israel, scattered for centuries, became a nation again, just as foretold. Wars and rumors of wars shook the earth. Deception grew stronger. And the hearts of many grew cold. Lucifer knew what this meant. The clock was ticking. Time was running out. And soon, the final battle would begin. This war began in heaven. It spread to earth. And soon, it will come to an end. Because the king is coming back. Jesus promised it. I will return. And when he does, he won't come as a suffering servant. He will come as a conquering king. Every eye will see him. Every knee will bow. And Lucifer? He will fight. He will gather his armies. He will unleash every weapon, every deception, every last ounce of power. But it won't matter. Because this time, Jesus isn't coming to die. He's coming to win. Forever. The war that began in heaven will have its final clash on earth. It's called Armageddon. Lucifer, now known as Satan, will rally his armies. The nations of the world, deceived by him, will rise against God. They will stand against the king. They will think they can win. But then, the sky will split. A trumpet will sound. And Jesus will return, riding on a white horse, clothed in glory, leading the armies of heaven. With just a word, the battle will end. Satan's forces will fall. And the war, it will be over. Forever. Lucifer, once the most glorious angel in heaven, now stands in chains. Defeated. Powerless. No more deception. No more rebellion. No more war. The judgment has come. And in one final act, Satan is cast into the lake of fire. Not for a day. Not for a year. Forever. His kingdom? Gone. His rule? Over. The enemy who once shook heaven itself. Now nothing more than a prisoner of his own rebellion. With evil destroyed, God makes all things new. A new heaven. A new earth. No more pain. No more death. No more war. The world that was broken is restored. And humanity? Those who chose God, who followed the truth, who refused to bow to the lies, they will reign with him forever. Imagine a world without fear. Without sorrow. Without darkness. This was always the plan. And now it has come to pass. From the very beginning, this war was never about who was stronger. Lucifer was never a match for God. It was about loyalty. It was about choice. The angels had to choose. Mankind had to choose. And you have to choose too. The battle is real. The enemy still whispers. But the victory has already been won. The question is, which side are you on? This war has raged for ages. It began in eternity past. It shaped the history of the world. And soon, it will come to its final conclusion. But for you, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. Because now, you know the truth. Now you see the battle for what it is. And now, you have a choice to make. The king is coming. Are you ready? This has been the shocking truth of the great war in heaven. A story that began before time and will soon reach its final chapter. If this video gave you something to think about, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your friends, family, and groups who need to hear this message. And if you want more deep content like this, hit the like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching, and remember, the battle is real, but the victory is already won.